Hey guys, so in this week's video we're talking about DJ effects. This little row of knobs at the top of your DJ decks. You can twist them and they add different effects to the songs you're playing, but most people probably don't fully understand what those effects are doing to your song, and it'll make you a much better DJ if you know exactly what those effects are doing to the song when you add them in. So in this week's video we're going to go through all the different top DJ effects you might be using, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they do and when to use them. Here we go. Okay guys, so for those of you who are quite new to DJing, if you go to your DJ software, I'm on Serato DJ, but it'll probably be the same for most DJing software out there. At the top there's an FX section up here which you can click on, and it will show you the different effects you can add to the knobs at the top of your DJ decks. So here you can see I've got 3 effects here and with a drop down, and each drop down has the same effects in. You can choose which one you want for which knob, and then when you come to your DJ decks you'll notice that when you change the knob up here like this, it will change the little circle underneath the effects, and you can turn the effects on and off, and you can see it gets turned on and off there. So that will basically allow you to just choose which knobs you want to do what on your DJ decks. Cool, so I've been having a look at this and I reckon we can break down DJ effects into 3 or 4 categories. The first category is delay effects, and if I just do this drop down here you'll see there's delay, echo, there's version echo down here, and pan delay. All of those go into delay effects and they do similar things, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Then we've got distortion, which is another effect. We've got filter effects, so low pass filter, high pass filter, LFO filter, and comb filter. Then we've got reverb, and then we've got phaser and flanger. And I'm just going to cover all of these today. I'm just going to tell you exactly what each one of them does. Cool, so I'm going to start with delays. Just to explain to you verbally exactly what delays do, it's kind of think along the lines of an echo. If you walk into a cave and you go, hello, 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 hello. It's like the sound is being repeated at regular intervals and getting quieter over time. Now, I'm going to demonstrate these effects to you, but I'm not just going to use a song where there's tons of stuff going on. I've just created a really simple track with just a cowbell running, so you can really clearly hear the sounds and what they're doing to the sounds, okay? So the track just sounds like this. Now when we add effects to it, you'll clearly understand exactly what's going on. So let's start off with the simplest, which is just delay. So I'm going to select that. I'm just going to add it in so you can hear. You're going to hear what happens is it just kind of adds a second one of the sound and it just gets quieter over time. So let's have a listen. So it just kind of adds a second one of the sound, and depending on where you've got it, it might just kind of mash in with all the other cowbells. But what you can do is the 4th knob along, there's usually one that says beats, and if you change it, it changes this setting here to 1/16, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2, and that'll say how often you want this effect to kick in. If it's on every half beat, for example, it means every half beat you will have that sound repeated. But if you put it down to a quarter, it means on every quarter beat it'll be repeated. So have a listen, okay? I'm just going to turn it on and I'm going to play around with the beats knob. So I'm going to turn this up to about halfway. See, on the 16th, it's like how quick you want the effect to kick in. Now, let me show you visually exactly what is going on here. So I'm going to go over to Ableton to show you this. What I've got here is just one of these cowbells. It just sounds like this. Now, a delay on Ableton, there's a delay plugin I can add in, and it does exactly the same thing. So when you hit it, you'll hear the sound repeated. And now if you want to see this in a visual form, I'm just going to show you this waveform here, which is basically this cowbell here, but with the simple delay on it, and then I've flattened the sound. So as you can see on Ableton, I've got a plugin on this track here, but the plugin is not visibly showing what it's doing. Whereas here, I've actually flattened the sound so you can see visually exactly what is going on. So let me just single out this track and you can see. It just has multiple sounds, so that's all simple delay is doing. Okay guys, so I'm actually just going to quickly tell you about another effect called reverb. I'm going to jump in and tell you this whilst I'm telling you about the different delay effects, because some of these delay effects I believe have a bit of reverb in them. So that's why I'm going to explain this one first. Now reverb you probably already know about. Reverb just makes your voice sound, or whatever sound you're playing, sound like it's in a bigger room. If you want to kind of visually think about how reverb works, think about saying something and all the sound waves going off and hitting different objects in the room and then all bouncing back randomly and then dying off over time. It creates this kind of muffled, delayed effect, and that's probably the best way I can explain it. That's how I explain it verbally, but I'm just going to give you a demonstration of it and then I'm going to visually show you what it does to the sound waves. So, this is a cowbell effect normally. And this is what happens if you add a bit of reverb in. Just sounds like I've taken that sound and put it in a huge hall or something. Okay guys, so if I jump on Ableton, I'm going to show you exactly what reverb does to your sound. So you can see here, this is just a regular cowbell sound. You can see it's quite short, it's not much going on, and if you listen to it, it just sounds like this. But this is a cowbell sound with reverb on it, and look at how different it looks. It's got a lot more stuff added to it, and it makes the sound longer as well. So basically it can tend to kind of make your track sound a lot muddier because there's so much added to the sound. It just muffles everything basically. Okay guys, so the next effect I want to talk about is echo. The reason why I jumped in and told you about reverb is because I believe echo is just delay with a bit of reverb, okay? So I'm just going to play Serato here and I'm just going to add in the echo effect and see if you agree with me here. It sounds like a delay with a bit of echo. So to me it sounds a bit like this. If I jump back onto Ableton, here you can see I've got the cowbell by itself. It sounds like this. But if you add that delay in, and then add a bit of reverb as well, and maybe a little bit more feedback, which just means the sound goes on for longer. That sounds really similar to me if you go back and just listen to this. So actually I'm just going to play the beat with it on. And now have a listen to it here. It's the same thing, it's delay with a bit of reverb. Now the next effect I want to talk about is called version echo, which is another delay. And it's very similar to echo, but all it really does is as you turn it up, it just extends the length of the echo. So you know a second ago I just said, if I put the feedback up in Ableton, it just made the sound go on for longer. Version echo is just a little bit like that. So if I play it and I turn version echo up, you'll just see the echo goes on for longer. You see, if I make it a bit quicker, you'll really notice this. In fact, if you turn it up too high, it almost just goes into an infinite loop where it just plays back constantly. Have a listen. And that'll never stop. If you put it up all the way to the top, it'll just reverb and echo into itself just infinitely and never stop. So I'm just going to go back into Ableton. I'm going to show you exactly what's going on here. So we've got the regular cowbell, but what I've done is I've just put this feedback all the way up. Now remember what I said, feedback just makes it longer, so have a listen. And then if I was to show you what it looks like in kind of printed form, it just looks like this. You can see it just goes on for longer. So that's all version echo is. It's echo, which is delay and reverb. And as you turn it up, it just goes on for longer. So that's all that's really going on there. The next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was another form of delay, which is called pan delay. A pan effect is where the sound goes from the left to the right to the left to the right. It's also known as a ping pong effect, because you can kind of think of a ping pong, the sound ping ponging back and forth. Ping ponging I don't think is a real word. Now, you're not going to massively hear this because I'm playing my DJ decks out of my speakers into one speaker, so you won't hear it as much, but you'll hear it more when I demonstrate it on Ableton. Having said that, I am just going to play it briefly on my DJ deck so you can hear. So now I'm just going to jump on Ableton and I'm going to show you exactly what's going on. If you've got good speakers or headphones, you're going to notice this a lot more than just playing out of your phone or out of just a mono speaker, okay? If I was to just take this sound, notice how I can pan the sound to the right. So now it's just coming out the right speaker. And now just out the left speaker. What you can do with a delay is you can actually tell it to delay the sound differently in the right and the left speaker. So let me just bring this in and show you exactly what I'm talking about. If we go onto this, I can go to pan echo here. And if I turn it on, what you're going to notice is I've got this percentage here for the left and right slightly different. So if I was to play it now, you'll hear it sounds like it kind of bounces back and forth slightly. And if we were to look at the printed form, what you're going to notice is, in Ableton, it shows you the left and right audio. So I think this is the left and this is the right. And you'll notice that the two waveforms don't sit perfectly underneath each other, which tells me that they're coming out of the two speakers at slightly different times. So now you can kind of visually see exactly what happens when you put a pan effect on. It plays out of the speakers at slightly different times. So there we go, guys. That's pan delay for you. So guys, the next effect I want to talk about is distortion. Distortion is kind of exactly what you'd imagine it to be. It basically makes the sound a lot rougher. And when I say it makes the sound a lot rougher, it literally takes the wave files and kind of makes them look rougher. Literally, it just kind of completely distorts the sound. So I'm going to go to a part of the song where I've got some chords, very basic chords, just put in. It sounds like this. Okay, now I've put the chords in because it's going to make it easier for you to hear this distortion. On the surface, all it's going to seem that distortion is doing is making the sound louder, which does have that effect, which is why a lot of distortion is used in dance music. But I'm going to show you in a minute what it's actually doing. Let me just play you an example of what distortion does. You can see that it starts to sound really muffled and dirty and just... It's hard to use words to describe sounds, but that's the best way I could describe it. Just more aggressive sounding. Okay guys, so we're back on Ableton and I'm going to show you exactly what distortion does to your sound. The best way to demonstrate this to you is to show you a sine wave, which is just the most simplest sound wave you can get. Just a smooth sound that goes up and down, and it sounds a little bit like this. Okay, what I'm going to do is add a bit of distortion to this now by turning up the overdrive, and you're going to hear it just makes the sound a bit more aggressive. So, as you can see, all it seems to do is just make the sound a little bit more dirty and a little bit louder. But I want to visually show you exactly what happens to the sound. So I'm just going to duplicate this lane and I'm going to flatten it. So let me just come here, freeze track, flatten track. And now if we zoom in, look at the difference between the two sound waves. The top one, which is the sine wave, just sounds completely smooth. But the distorted wave suddenly looks more jaggedy and rough. And that's literally what it's doing to the sound. You can hear it as well. It just sounds much rougher than it was before. So let me show you again exactly what the difference is between the two. If you play the sine wave by itself, it sounds smooth. And if you play it with distortion on, it sounds really rough. And that, guys, is all that's really happening when you add distortion to the sound. It's just messing up the sound waves and making them a bit sharper and a bit more jagged, and it's having that exact effect on the sound. Okay guys, so the next effect I want to talk about is the filters. So what you've got here is a high pass filter, a low pass filter, and an LFO filter. You guys will know about this from the filter knob at the bottom of your DJ decks, just the one at the bottom here, when you can kind of sweep the sound down, cut the lows, cut the highs. I'm just going to briefly show you exactly what it does. If I go to my cowbell effect up here and I play it, it just sounds like this. But what I can do is put an EQ on it, and I'm going to show you visually what happens when you do a low cut. So a low cut just simply looks like this. And it just gradually takes away all the higher frequencies. And then a high cut, all it does is it takes away all the lower frequencies first. So have a look at this, okay? So that's exactly the same as me coming to Serato here and putting a low pass on. So let's have a listen to that. Takes all the high frequencies away. And if I put a high pass filter on instead, it'll take away all the low frequencies first. So let's have a listen. Okay guys, so the next thing I want to talk about is the LFO filter. LFO basically stands for low frequency oscillator. So as you know, a second ago I just showed you the sine wave that just went up and down. Well, LFO in production terms is something which you can affect a parameter to just change slowly over time, going up and down. So in a nutshell, an LFO filter, all it's doing is it's filtering up and filtering down over whatever time period you want. So whether it's a beat, whether it's half a beat, quarter of a beat, even 2 beats, it's filtering up and it's filtering down. So just have a listen to this, okay? You can hear it sounds like it's filtering up and filtering down. I'm going to show you this in a bit more detail now if we jump over onto Ableton. So on Ableton you can get this thing just called an LFO. As you can see, it sweeps up and down. And I've tracked this to the parameters of this EQ here. So you can see it's kind of filtering up and it's filtering down. And that's all this LFO is doing. So if I was to play it, you'll hear it has a very similar effect. And in a nutshell, guys, that's all it's doing. An LFO, it just sweeps up and down. So if you ever see an LFO reverb, an LFO echo, it just means it's going to change over time. It's just going to move up and down. That's basically all it is, okay? I also want to talk about the comb filter. It's really difficult to explain what a comb filter is, but it's easy to show you. So I'm just going to quickly jump onto Ableton again. And on the screen you can see I've got a plugin open called Serum. It looks really complicated, but don't worry about that. I only want to show you the filter section. So up here we've got the filter section. Now, if I was to just select a regular low-pass filter, you guys will recognize what this looks like. You sweep down and it cuts all the high frequencies. So if I was to get a chord and just play it, you'll hear it cut all the highs. But a comb filter does a similar thing, but looks very, very different. So if I get a comb filter and I put the resonance up, as you can see, as I bring this comb filter down, you'll see it's not just a clean sweep where it's just cutting all the highs. As you bring it down, it's got this really jaggedy effect, which means it's not just taking away frequencies. It's boosting some, it's dipping others, boosting some, dipping others. And as you bring it up and down, it will create this kind of distortion at the same time. So it won't just cut the frequencies, it'll also add distortion. And it won't just cut the high frequencies, it'll add distortion. So let me hold a chord and I'm just going to move this comb filter up and down for you to hear what it sounds like. Let me turn the resonance up even more so you can hear it even more extreme. That's essentially what a comb filter is. Now, it's not as extreme on Serato as the effect I just played you. So all you're going to really hear on Serato is it cutting away the lows or cutting the highs and adding a little bit of distortion. So let's have a listen. So the final effect I want to talk about is probably the most complicated one. It's phaser and flanger. Well, first thing you need to know is a flanger is just a more extreme version of a phaser. And phaser comes from something in music production called phasing. Phasing is when two sounds are so similar they begin to cancel each other out. I'm going to show you that straight away on Ableton. So guys, here we have another sine wave. It just goes up and down like this, and it sounds like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. So we've got two lanes with the same sine wave on it. Okay, you can see they're exactly the same. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invert the sine wave. So instead of going up and down, it goes down and then up. So I'm just going to quickly do that now by dropping a utilities on it and inverting the sound. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly flatten this. So freeze and flatten. And now what you'll see is the two sound waves we've got here are exactly opposite. So as the top one goes up, the bottom one goes down, and then they come back together again, okay? Now, what you might think is playing two very similar sounds next to each other is just going to make it twice as loud. But because they're exact opposites to each other, what they end up doing is completely cancelling out the noise. So if you listen to one by itself, by soloing this track, it sounds like this. If I solo both the tracks together so you can hear them both at the same time, have a listen. Silence. The two waves cancel each other out, and it's called phasing, and you can often get phasing issues. So you're probably thinking, how does this relate to the phaser? Because the phaser doesn't just make it completely quiet. So this is what's happening. The two waves will be moved slightly in and out from each other. So if I begin to bring this along slightly, you'll hear it quietly, and along a bit more, gets a bit louder again, bit louder again. So guys, as you can see, when you've got two waveforms that are identical sitting on top of each other, but one of them is inverted, it completely cancels out the sound. But as you move them alongside each other, you can hear the sound getting louder and quieter. That's essentially what phaser does. So what I'm going to do now is just show you on Ableton, same sine wave. So if I just play it, you'll hear it doesn't sound hugely different. But if I move the frequency up and down here, you'll hear it kind of phasing in and out. So let's just have a quick listen. I'm going to put the feedback all the way up so it's really aggressively changing the sound, and play it again. You can hear the sound kind of getting quieter and louder. Now, on a sine wave, that's not very exciting at all, because all it does is it makes it sound quieter and louder. But as soon as you put this phaser effect on a slightly more interesting sound, with more frequencies and more interesting frequencies going on, you'll see it completely changes the sound. So here I've got some chords that just sound a little bit like this. And watch what happens when I put this phaser on and start playing with the frequencies and moving them around. It creates this weird kind of whirring electronic sound. You can hear this kind of kind of sound. It's really interesting, and all it's really doing is just affecting that same phasing. And flanger is exactly the same, it's just a little bit more extreme. So let's have a listen to flanger. See, it creates really crazy effects. So now you guys know exactly what it's doing to the sound. Let's jump back on Serato and I'll show it to you, okay? So let's select the phaser first. I'm going to go to the chord section here, and let's have a listen. And now let's put the flanger on. So there we go guys, that's phaser and flanger. It's really odd, and I don't even fully understand it myself, because we went from two sounds just cancelling each other out to suddenly this really screechy, screamy kind of sound. It's weird, but that's just what happens to the sound. When you take a sound wave, you double it, and then you move those two sound waves around on top of each other, it just creates these screechy and screamy effects. Unless, of course, you're just playing it on a straight up sine wave, in which case it'll just cancel it out and bring it back. Anything more interesting than that, you get these crazy screechy effects, and it's really cool. Okay guys, so quite complicated video for you there, but hopefully you've got a much better understanding of exactly what all these different effects do, and now when you add them into your song, you're going to know exactly what's going on in your head, which will help you to become better DJs. I hope this video has helped. If it has and you've enjoyed it, make sure you give it a like, leave a comment if you've got any thoughts, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos just like this. If you guys are new to DJing and you don't know about any of the knobs on this DJ decks and you want to learn all about DJing, how to mix, how to add effects, how to do really cool stuff with your DJ decks, I've got a full course at beginnerdjlessons.com, and if you guys are more interested in that kind of Ableton side of stuff and adding effects and maybe creating your own songs, well, you may want to check out my beginner Ableton lessons, where I'll teach you everything you need to know about producing your own dance music. You can take effects like that and create really cool tracks from really simple sounds. And then you can actually start DJing out your own music, which is really, really cool. I can tell you now, guys, there's nothing better than watching a crowd of people dance to a song that you've actually made yourself. So if you're interested in that side of things, definitely go and check out my beginner Ableton lessons. Guys, that's it for this week, so I'll see you next week. See you later. Ciao!